So in this segment, we're going to be discussing this clip on when a Brexiter is asked what areas would you deregulate, they absolutely faceplant. And this is the same lady who Tobias Elwood kind of shouted out of the room a bit. And, I made a video saying the case to actually let Brexiters talk because they look stupid when they speak. And I think this is really good proof of it, honestly. Because she gets asked the question, has absolutely no answer. And you're just like, wow, you guys are really dumb. You guys are real dumb. And I think the more the electorate, at least I hope the more the electorate sees this stuff, the more they realise that, these people, these Brexiteers, they ain't it. This isn't what they wanted. And backing these people is the wrong idea. So let's have a listen.
Which laws did you want to get rid of specifically? Were there areas of law that you just wanted to scrap that had been brought in by the EU, most of them with our cooperation?
Cooperation being the kind of contested word in terms of
and
democratically.
And the laws you wanted to get rid of?
Well,
so, contested, the UK had a veto over certain things, as all other EU member states do. The UK also had a decent amount of MEPs as well. We were part of the Council of Ministers, and even some of the things that the EU implemented, we didn't actually do. And I think those are things the EU could have taken us to court over, but they decided not to, or they could have at least tried to take action over it. So, this idea is nonsense. We're the ones that have vetoed an EU-India deal. So the idea that we kind of are hostage or anything in the EU, or we really hate any of the EU rules, is just nonsense. We played a key part in the formation of, for example, the financial rules. So let's see what this genius comes up with.
There's a lot of stuff in relation to environmental regulation, which I think has held up things that we were talking about previously, planning permission for house building and things like that.
So with planning permission, right, the EU doesn't deal with that. That's up to individual nation states. And the UK, I don't know specifically the rules around our planning permission, but, generally it's up to the councils to deal with planning permission. They're the ones who grant it. So the idea that the EU is hampering planning permission, that one I'm going to say is 90% in doubt, I'll be honest. They might have some rules on building aspects, but for the most part, it's the government and the councils. And if you're mad about, say, the lack of house building, for example, that would be down to NIMBYs. So, and the EU didn't invent NIMBYs. They've been here for a long time. And the EU definitely not doing enough to stop. The EU don't really do much to stop NIMBYs because it's not really within their remit. It's not something they see as important. But the government should be doing more to deal with them instead of placating them. But that's a different rant.
There's some specifics around stuff that I'm interested in around the sale of infant formula, which, we don't have time to go into that. But there's...
You literally do have time to go into that because she gave you the floor. She said, what do you specifically want to deregulate? So what that tells me is you got nothing. You've talked about planning permission, nothing to do with the EU. You talked about environmental laws, which, okay, that is to do with the EU, but the specific example you gave after that has nothing to do with it. Infant milk, you want to deregulate that. Are you sure about that? I don't think that's a great idea. What kind of milk do you want to give to kids? Especially since you have such an interest in it. You had the floor there and you done goofed, and I think the host should have held her accountable there. I would have.
The point is that enacting this kind of change was part of the Brexit promise, which was that we would be in control of our own laws. And if you look at
we are literally in control of our own laws because we copy and pasted those laws. And if we wanted to deregulate them, we could do. Nothing is stopping us. We're not copying the EU rules on arsenic, where the EU have lowered the legal level of arsenic within things like baby food. The UK decided not to follow the EU on that, and the companies involved, like Nestle, were like, well, actually, we're going to follow the EU rules because we want to continue, exporting baby food. So she's talking absolute drivel.
Countries within the European Union. There's no evidence that, what the EU law is protecting pensioners in France, for example. It's like we all...
If the EU were protecting pensioners in France, right, if the EU enacted laws to protect pensioners, guarantee 100% this lady will be crying about it. This argument, oh, well, the EU aren't doing enough here. That's because it's up to member states to decide the pension age. Hence why we have a higher retirement age than other EU member states. Well, we've always had it, a higher retirement age whilst we're members of the EU than other EU member states. So her argument makes no sense. Again, and the host has to do a much better job of calling this stuff out because she's talking absolute nonsense. Absolute nonsense, and it doesn't take a genius to figure this out, honestly.
We always suggest that without EU law we will become kind of barbarians, and I think
but which laws would you like to get?
No one even argued that we would become barbarians without EU laws. Like, what are you talking about? Honestly, it's just painful. And the fact that she was given the floor to talk about this stuff, talked absolute nonsense, and the host was like, oh yeah, sound, and then moves on to the next person. What the hell? Honestly, The hosts in British TV news channels are so bad, so bad. It just causes me pain. You know, she had a good minute there, or she had a good at least 30 seconds there to talk about what she wanted to talk about. She talked about environmental rules and planning permission, nothing to do with the EU planning permission specifically, right? She talked about baby formula, which it's whatever. And then she talks about, well, the EU aren't protecting, pensioners in France or the pension age in France. That has nothing to do with them, and it just causes me pain when they get away with this stuff. And the host is like, well, anyways, and you're like, oh. I'm not a big fan of interruptions, even though I constantly interrupt people on the channel when I'm doing these sorts of videos, and people get annoyed about it, but whatever. But I think you gotta either the panel's got to do better there, or the host has got to do better there, because this is one of the reasons why misinformation spreads so easily in this country, because you get these people who work for certain organisations, and you're just like, oh, please stop doing this. It just causes me pain. But anyways, I'm going to leave it there before I rant on forever. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Like, comment, share, subscribe. Support the channel on Patreon if you can. And hopefully I'll see you in the next one.